VA-11 Hall A, also known as Valhalla, is a independent game made by Sukeban Games, a cyberpunk bartender action game. It's actually a bartending simulator, but it's a cool subtitle. You play as a bartender named Jill, and you are serving drinks to people in this, what is essentially a Blade Runner like city. Um, so it's cyberpunk, but it's what you would get if you mixed cyberpunk with Cheers. The whole game is set around a bar, a small bar, and your job is to serve drinks. That is it. You're playing as a bartender in this cyberpunk world. And I love it. I love this game, viewers. I have so much love for this game. And that's because the game itself is a labor of love. There's so much. It's one of those examples of a game that gets by on pure personality, pure flair and charm. It doesn't need this world-saving plot. It doesn't need to be about, saving the world or some epic, grand 60-hour thing or whatever. I mean, I like those, but that's not what this is. And the fact that this game, doesn't have to be that. Your character is essentially a nobody. You're playing as a girl named Jill, who is a fully established character. She's not just a cipher for the player. She has her own personal arc. She's this 27-year-old, kind of cynical woman who is doing just enough to get by, and she's bartending every night at this bar called Valhalla, as the title itself describes. And the mechanics, gameplay-wise, are very simple. There's not much to talk about there. You have a big list of drinks that have to be mixed in a certain way and have to be combined, and there's just a small little display window to the side that just allows you to just drag stuff and mix stuff and combine stuff to make your cocktails and beers and other things, and they all have these cool fictional names. It's very simple mechanically. Really, all you're doing is going by memorization, and as long as you stick to that, you'll probably screw up pretty rarely. But even if you do, it's not really a big penalty. It might just change the dialogue you get from the characters you're serving, which is the real meat and potatoes of this game. The dialogue and the character interactions are wonderful. It's rare to find a game with great comedy, viewers. That's not something you see very often, but I think this is probably one of the funniest games I've played. It's got the anime trappings, it's got this great otaku visual style, if you will. You can tell that it was made for the anime otaku faithful viewers. It's a real weeb-looking game, and the writing certainly falls into that sort of fun, balancing out all of the sort of gritty, edgy cyberpunk stuff with this levity. All the characters you're serving are 100% unique. They're all strange, wonderful characters, and because it's set in this cyberpunk world, you never know who you're going to encounter. It's the same thrill you might get from encountering new bosses in an action game, or new enemy types or whatever. It's what makes the game compelling is seeing what kind of customers are going to walk in and you're going to have to serve, because you never know what they're going to be like or what kind of dialogue they're going to offer, and it's always something different. You might have one character that's like this gruff journalist who goes on and on about all the stories he's cooking up and all the dirt he's got on the in this city, and there might be another character that's like this tough police SWAT person, just like from police force, and she's wearing all this armor and talking about the burning building she had to escape or whatever. And then you might encounter a character who is a sex worker who also happens to be an android. So it's that kind of game, viewers. You never know what kind of character you're going to encounter. Some of them may not even be human, and some of them are pure comic relief. Some of them actually have like stories to tell and almost like arcs that play out over the course of like each shift. You know, you get to know these characters better and better, and there are some variations in dialogue depending on how well you serve them. There are even times where a character might get more or less drunk, and their dialogue will reflect that, depending on how strong you decide to make their drinks. So there's all kinds of fun things like that. That's not to say that it's like overflowing with branching paths. You know, I'm sure it's still mostly scripted, but, you know, there are multiple endings, so who's to say? I've only gotten one of those endings, so I'm not sure how many variations you can get, but it doesn't even matter regardless, because the game creates such a great effective illusion even on your first playthrough, that I could easily see myself going back again and again, and I have, because it's a great game. Like I said, it's a game that gets by so much on personality and charm, which is like, I feel like there's just not enough of that in the industry these days. And yes, it's an indie title, you kind of sort of expect that. But unlike something like, let's say, Papers, Please, which, you know, kind of similar in the sense that it's a simple, you know, mechanically and conceptually, the premise is just like, you couldn't possibly get more simple. But it's so overflowing with personality and little touches, like the way you can set up a playlist from a jukebox for each individual shift, for each night, so you can hear the soundtrack how you want to, and which is really great, by the way. It's a great soundtrack, great music in this game. And, you know, the fact that the bartender you're playing as, Jill, does have her own story to tell, her own arc. So it's like, while it does work sort of as a very simple, accessible simulation game, it feels like a legit world that you're taking part in, and it feels like a world that leaves a lot to your imagination. A lot of the characters, you know, we don't know what's, you know, we don't see it firsthand what all these characters are doing and experiencing when they leave the bar or before they come. But that's what makes the game so entertaining, is that hearing their stories as they buy drinks. And, you know, by the end of this game, I felt like half of these characters were just, it was almost like, you know, jumping into a chat room full of friends. It has that, you know, it really does a good job of recreating that feeling of being in a bar, while still mashing it together with the fantastical nature of Cyberpunk. So, yeah, it is a fantastic game on all fronts for me. And what really drives it home for me, viewers, is that the developers from Sukaban Games really made this game from the heart. It was a real passion project. You know, they're from Venezuela. It's a very small, low-budget team, and, you know, they actually mentioned that during the game's development, a lot of the influence that went into the story and the characters really comes from their own personal experiences of living in a country that actually does have a lot of political upheaval, a lot of poverty issues, and a lot of despair. They have a lot of problems down there, and growing up in that environment, they talked about how they still managed to find, you know, friends and experiences that made them laugh, and they still managed to, you know, to sort of find the light in all of that, you know, the levity of it, you know, within the despair, within the struggling and all that. And it really is reflected in the game. Like, there's so much heart to this game, despite the dark, gritty setting. You know, this futuristic cyberpunk, it's got all of the, you know, it has references to all those things you expect, the 1984 references, and a world overrun with technology and surveillance and nano machines. All that stuff is kind of referenced in the game, you know, that you expect from Cyberpunk. And it's done in a way that hits home that much harder because your character is not a savior. A character can't change that world. She can only adapt to it and do her best to live within it, which, you know, is a great theme in general, but especially in a game. To have that sort of, you know, it's extremely relatable, more so than a lot of games we usually play, you know, where the character is learning more to become a part of this society, both with its flaws and its, you know, and its good qualities. And the fact that they worked that real life experience that they've had in their, you know, in their home country and poured that into the game is, it gives it that much more heart, viewers. It's that underdog feel for me. And it's actually, you know, it's been a successful game. It's a critical darling. It is getting a sequel in 2020 called Nirvana, with new characters and a new story. And the game itself, although only available on Steam right now, is coming to PlayStation 4 and Switch next year, which, great, you know, so wonderful, because it deserves all the exposure it can get. I love this game. And I highly recommend it to any of you that, you know, want something off the beaten path. This is one of the most refreshing game experiences I've ever had. And, you know, so much so that, you know, even though the indie market has a lot of good stuff that comes around every now and then, and it's unique, and they call it a gem or whatever, I'm never engaged by, like, the Limbos and Braids and all your Metroidvania clones and stuff, and your roguelikes, and I'm just like, it's all, that stuff all just bleeds together to me. What I want to see more of from the indie market, or heck, even gaming in general, guy can dream, is stuff like this that just feels like, yeah, video games can be more than just shoot 'em ups or hack and slashes or, you know, epic world-saving RPGs. I mean, I love that stuff, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that stuff should go away, but I would love to see more games like this. You know, the closest comparison I can think of is something like Catherine, you know, which also had kind of a bar setting and lots of unconventional stuff. But yeah, love this game, highly recommend it. And as always, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of my channel. And always, viewers, always live for the passion.